Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon.
And we have another fabulous podcast about, I bet you can't guess the topic. What do you think the topic is, Landon?
Psychics?
He's using his psychic powers. I actually have a crystal ball here on my table left over from Halloween, and also a presentation about Joseph Smith and the early magical view of Mormonism. So yes, that's exactly what we're talking about today. And of course, in relation to Operation Underground Railroad, I need to apologize to everybody on our previous podcast about this topic. I kept calling it our Underground Railroad. It was late. I got a note taped to my computer, Operation Underground Railroad. I'm going to try to do it right. Oh, my goodness. So the twists and turns of this story are absolutely incredible. I think most people have probably heard about what's going on. And every single day, it seems like there's something new that's coming out, doesn't it, Landon?
Yeah, Vice is putting out an article every day, and every day it just gets weirder and weirder. And today is probably the pinnacle of craziness that we're going to talk about.
As soon as you say the word pinnacle of craziness, something else is going to happen. So we are going to talk about the Vice article that came out just yesterday about Operation Underground Railroad's use of psychic intel to run their operations. And after the Vice article, which came out in the afternoon yesterday, there was another tidbit of information. Tim Ballard himself put out a video standing in front of the Lincoln's house where he was working on the Emancipation Proclamation. Tim himself is wearing a shirt with Lincoln on it, and he gives sort of an impassioned plea, saying that he will never stop fighting. He's being lied about. Two things he says of interest. He says, my church would not put out a statement because, of course, within the original Vice article, there was this seemingly put out statement by the LDS Church, Doug Anderson, a PR person that kind of condemned Tim Ballard. And of course, Tim Ballard is saying, nope, not my church. He said, my church doesn't put out statements like this, and my church isn't political. So to me, this is a really smart move because it means now the church, who has said nothing, silent since that article, will have to come out and say, yes, we are political, and yes, we did put out the statement. They're not going to do that. I doubt it. Most of us think probably the only thing they can do is throw Doug Anderson, the lower level PR person, under the bus and say he was rogue. We'll see. That's probably going to happen later today, and we'll have to do another podcast tomorrow. In the meantime, we're going to talk about this article from Vice. Let's go to our first slide that let us know something very surprising about Operation Underground Railroads, how they work, how they gather their intel, all kinds of things about Operation Underground Railroad. And it was pretty surprising to everybody. Just when we thought, like Landon said, it couldn't get any weirder, it got a little weirder. So our first slide says, for those of you that are listening and not watching, Nephi is running the show, and there's a picture of a psychic and a crystal ball with Nephi inside of it. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. A psychic named, we can go to our next slide, Janet Russon, apparently works extraordinarily closely with Operation Underground Railroad. And this is where they get most of their information, on which they base most of their activities. So it's going to go into it as we read the article, but very quickly, I'll just read some of the personal details from her bio here. It says, born and raised in Connecticut, Janet is proud to call herself a Yankee. She has attended Pine Manor College in Boston, Richmond College in London, and Brigham Young University in Utah, and holds a humanities degree. Like me, I hold a humanities degree. How interesting.
Did you have the psychic courses at BYU? Do they have psychic courses at BYU?
I missed that. I completely missed that, which I'm sad because I would have liked that.
Maybe it's an institute, prophetic manifestations or something like that. I'm not sure where you get.
I don't know. I'd be surprised if Brigham Young offered anything that kind of went down that path, but we'll see as we read more. So she does have a humanities degree. Jana and her husband, Richard Russon, have 9 children together, 7 of whom are adopted. Oh, that's interesting. She enjoys reading, flexing her foreign language skills, that's awesome, and traveling with her family in her spare time. Janet loves all sorts of physical activities, including, figure skating, hiking, skiing, and tennis. So she sounds like a pretty incredible person. But in this situation, her incredible talents are expanded past what we just heard into the otherworldly realm. So let's go forward to our next slide. All right. So the name of the article is, Landon, why don't you read that? And again, this appeared yesterday in Vice, which is doing kind of a continuing series about Operation Underground Railroad.
Yeah, it's Operation Underground Railroad child rescue missions were based on psychic intelligence, is the name of the article.
Wow.
Yeah, do you want
And the
me to read that?
subtitle says, Janet Russon, a psychic medium for Utah, was a central source of intelligence for O.U.R, leading to at least one failed mission and no evident rescues of missing children. So this is what we're going to cover today, and we will just dive right in. Landon, do you want to take the first paragraph or so?
Yeah, and I think this paragraph is, or this picture on the slide actually shows a picture of her on an actual mission, and they're all, it looks like they just have her in the back seat driving her around wherever she says to go to. But yeah, so,
I think we'll find out.
It was a tense day in February 2016 for Tim Ballard and operatives working for Operation Underground Railroad, the anti-human trafficking group he founded. They were on what would prove to be a bumbling and ineffective mission to save a trafficked child Ballard believed was being held in a village on the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. This wasn't just any mission, however. The child they were searching for was Gardy Marty, a missing Haitian boy whose abduction Ballard has portrayed as the case that has led us to found O.U.R. Joining him and his team of elite operatives was Janet Russon. I hope I'm saying that right.
No, we don't know. Sorry.
A psychic medium from Utah whose supposed visions were guiding the mission. According to documents from a now closed criminal investigation into Ballard and O.U.R. obtained by Vice News through a public records request, video shot by a crew hired by O.U.R. captured Russon talking with Gardy's father, Guesno Marty. In the conversation, Russon seemed to credit herself with locating Gardy. She assured him that his son was nearby and that without her visions, he never would have been found. No way you would have found this place. No way, she proclaimed, according to a transcript of the conversation written by a criminal investigator working on a joint investigation between the FBI and the Davis County Attorney's Office. Guesno, buddy, Ballard said during the conversation. He's here. We're going to get him. In fact, Gardy was found that day. Gardy was not found that day or any day since. There is no evidence to suggest that he was ever in the village where Russon's visions led O.U.R. and his hopeful father. Dave Lopez, a former head of O.U.R.'s op team who oversaw the organization's work in Haiti, told an FBI special agent and a Davis County investigator in October 2020 that Russon's visions were the only form of intelligence they were using to locate Gardy. As far as he knew, he said O.U.R. had no intelligence even suggesting Gardy was alive apart from what was provided by Russon. This was Ballard's most guarded secret, Lopez told the FBI.
Yep, let's go to the next slide. That's a key point that I think we want to talk about. Now, a lot of people have heard of Operation Underground Railroad. They've heard of the work they do. They go into countries and they're trying to protect and rescue the vulnerable and exploited children. And I think when you hear about an organization like this, you assume, Landon, at least I did, I don't know, they've got informants, they've got intel, they've got, maybe they're working hand in hand with some kind of governments of countries. And I'm sure they probably are doing all that, but it sounds like their main intel, as it says on our slide here, Russon's visions were the only form of intelligence that they were using in this case to locate Gardy. What do you think about that?
It seems incredible that they're actually taking, and from the pictures, it looks like there's a whole crew there. So 5, 6, 7 people are flying to Haiti to conduct a mission to find somebody that they don't even know if that person's alive. They've been missing for years. And they're driving around the countryside, like she's a GPS system, turn right, to turn left, trying to find this guy.
Now.
And that's all they've got. And meanwhile, they're on the phone with the poor boy's father, giving him hope that, we know where he's at. Yeah. We've located it. To give somebody hope like that, who's missing a child, is off of a psychic. That's criminal. You can see why there might be a criminal investigation.
No, And I will say that I do believe in intuition. I've had experiences in my own life where intuition has played into things, or maybe sometimes just dumb luck. So I'm not ruling out all of that. However, I think to allow all of the people in your organization to believe that there are probably a little more information through proper channels on which to base these we're talking these are $1 million operations. I mean, there's a lot of resources, money and time and people into this. And from my sources behind the scenes, I've heard that there are multiple people many times in these meetings with Janet, where she kind of goes into a trance and her eyes roll back in her head and she talks about the missing children and the information, the locations. I see it by a fork in a river. I see a tree. I see this. So we're not just talking about Tim Ballard himself basing things on this. I think there's many people in the upper level of the organization actually believe this. And I think that you will see some podcasts coming out in the coming days from other podcasters where they may be able to even talk to some people that have left the organization and have much more intimate knowledge of what is happening here. But extremely interesting that this is the basis of at least the Gardy Marty, completely based, the only intel on this particular operation. So, all right, let's continue reading. This is Tim Ballard's secret has been out for 2 years now. Ex-O.U.R operators or people sent on paramilitary missions with the organization in foreign countries told Vice News in 2021 that Russon's supposed psychic abilities were heavily relied on by Ballard and O.U.R to plan and carry out missions. Now, through the investigative files, reveal for the first time the level of influence Russon had within the organization, how much she was paid for her services, and how little intelligence there was to back up some of the missions conducted beyond her word, that of a Utah psychic who claimed to be able to communicate with the prophet Nephi, a figure from the Book of Mormon who has been dead for thousands of years. So she's not just receiving psychic intel. She is actually talking to Nephi, who anyone who's LDS and in this organization is going to recognize, as a pivotal, founding prophet of the Book of Mormon, somebody that can be trusted. So it's actually Nephi who is giving her information on how to reach and rescue these vulnerable children. What do you think about that, Landon?
Well, I guess I have to say they evidently weren't listening last conference, because we no longer rely on dead prophets. We should be relying on live prophets, and that's probably why they couldn't find Marty. Maybe they should have been going to President Nelson for the information. That might have helped them.
And again, we hope and pray that someday Gardy Marty will be rescued, because it's a horrific situation to even think about. But the idea that all these operations have been happening behind the scenes based on the words of Nephi leading us today, it's almost hard to wrap your brain around. Like you said, Landon, it can't get any weirder. So O.U.R provided a statement about Russon's work that is reprinted in full below in the article. And again, I encourage everyone to find this article. It's on Vice. You can read it in your entirety and make your own call on this. Tim Ballard did not respond to a request for comment. In a brief phone call, Russon declined to comment when asked about each claim made in the story, telling a reporter, "We just won't have a conversation. Thank you so much for the call." So very politely said no. She previously had told Vice News that she had signed an NDA. I'm not surprised about that, and was unable to answer questions about O.U.R. I'm sure that is true. Do you want to read the next paragraph then, Landon, and go to that next slide?
Oh, yes, I would absolutely. An investigator wrote in the documents that they had learned that Russon was being paid a monthly consultant fee of approximately $5,000 with an hourly operational readings contract of approximately $1,560 by O.U.R, and that the group relied on her visions to do operational planning for missions. So wow. $5,000 a month she's getting paid, plus every time she does a reading, she gets an additional $1,500.
Yep.
Wow, mind blowing. and I have to say, I can't make any there's nothing in the document stating this, but when you have a beautiful woman on your payroll at $5,000 a month to give psychic readings, you have to wonder if that.
No, it tells me absolutely that that they took it seriously. I mean, they're compensating her very well for her intel, and it tells me that they believe in that process. They do believe that she's talking to Nephi, and they do believe that she can give them information that can help them rescue the children. And she's a pivotal player here in their organization, and not only just Tim, but many people at the top in upper leadership at Operation Underground Railroad believe in her, because this is the kind of salary that she's pulling down. Again, I'm saying I wish they would have had that course at BYU in my humanities program. Maybe I too could be making that kind of money. That is just crazy. So, all right, let's go on as we talk about these details of how it actually works. Nor were mission planning or psychic visions the end of Russon's association with O.U.R. or other entities in the child rescue space. Subsequently, she was named as the executive director of Children Need Families, a for-profit company started by Ballard's wife, Catherine, which said it provides grants to families seeking to adopt children. At another point, while she served on the board of directors of another organization, she identified herself as O.U.R.'s director of strategic alliances, a description which did not mention her purported psychic abilities. Let's take it back one slide to the psychic picture as we talk about Janet. Yes, she did not mention, there we go, her purported psychic abilities. The organization Rod's Heroes, which promotes adoption for children with special needs, did not respond to requests for a comment from Vice News. So she definitely was involved in other areas of O.U.R., the adoption process, trying to find homes for vulnerable children. She was a trusted and key player, is kind of how I take it. Janet Russon worked as a full-time executive director for the Children's Need Families program for the last 2 years, with a starting salary of $122,000 per year and a final salary of $125,000 per year. She left O.U.R. shortly after Mr. Ballard's departure, because as we all remember, a few months ago during the summer, when his movie, The Sound of Freedom, was blowing up the box office, he departed from O.U.R., and it sounds like she left very close to that time. None of her work with CN. Go ahead.
Does that seem a little suspicious to you? I mean, has anyone investigated whether there was any relationship there where someone's getting paid that much and then they both leave at the same time?
Yeah. I think maybe Janet saw the writing on the wall after Tim had to leave, or perhaps Tim was her absolute champion in the organization, and after he left, maybe she didn't have as much support as she had before. I think those are things that Vice will probably look into for sure, but it looks like they both left right about the same time. For any questions about her alleged psychic abilities, services rendered to Mr. Ballard, or payments for those services, please ask Ms. Russon or Mr. Ballard. So it sounds like Vice then is not exactly what you said, going to go into any more details, except for that we know her psychic abilities led the missions while Tim was still involved with the organization.
It's interesting that O.U.R. says, hey, ask Ms. Russon or Mr. Ballard any of these questions, but then they say, oh, we have an NDA agreement. Well, has O.U.R. released that NDA agreement then? Because O.U.R. is saying they can talk, evidently. If they're saying go ask them, that'd be
I'm saying, I think they're saying it's out of our hands. You know, you're going to have to go deal with them, and you will probably hear that they both have NDAs, probably. So, although Tim does seem to like videos, so maybe he'll weigh in a little bit more on this. Who knows? Ballard left O.U.R. this summer following an internal investigation into sexual misconduct allegations made against him. 3 weeks later, he left the Nazarene Fund, a sister organization to O.U.R. founded by conservative commentator Glenn Beck. So yes, Glenn Beck has his fingerprints all over this too, although everybody is putting out statements and then retracting statements. It's just this whole, hodgepodge of who's connected to who's trying to protect themselves politically, how is the church involved? There's just a lot of players and a lot of jockeying that we're seeing. Let's see. The Nazarene Fund told Vice News in a statement, there were no concerns or suspicions of wrongdoing by Tim Ballard regarding his work at the Nazarene Fund. O.U.R. under Ballard stressed its sophisticated intelligence gathering and military-style raid and rescue tactics. And that's, again, what I'm saying. I think a lot of us assumed, and a lot of the documentaries and videos provided, it really looked like they were, top-notch, top-level intelligence. They were getting into these countries through these channels. They worked with a lot of people that were former military. They worked with, it sounded like, government liaisons. I'm not saying that might not also have been happening, but as the one statement said before, the top level of intelligence was coming from a psychic and coming from Book of Mormon prophet Nephi. And some may find that more comforting than the other avenues that I mentioned. I don't know.
I think Revelation is a sophisticated intelligence gathering. Think how many things the bishop has learned. That's how we find our keys and everything, is through that sophisticated.
Well, and that's what I question. Yeah, is how would any of these prophets have time to help for these very serious things when they spend most of their time, as we know, finding lost keys? Which I admit, when I was at TBM, I've asked for help because I do lose my keys a lot. Now I have one of those little things on it that, you can look up on your phone. You're like, oh, your keys are literally in your purse. You just can't find them because of everything else that's in your purse, like your crystal ball. So anyway, all right. As Vice News previously reported, Utah County Attorney Troy Rawlings, who opened the investigation into O.U.R, wrote in an email, and this I think is the key thing, donors, because Operation Underground Railroad has incredible support worldwide. Many people in the LDS Church are donors to O.U.R and supporters. I live in Utah County. I hear about O.U.R all the time. I personally know people that are supporters and donors. It's a very big thing in the LDS Church. Donors are not made aware that Nephi, via Russon, is the key piece of O.U.R Operation Intelligence. Rawling wrote that email to the Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes as O.U.R ally who had previously gone on missions with the group. Now, you have some questions about that kind of, don't you, Landon? Even that prior investigation, which was done looking into fraud, looking into things like this with O.U.R, trying to find information. They found that donors were not aware where the intel was coming from. It was sent to Sean Reyes. And then what happened to the investigation?
It says no charges were pressed on the investigation. So I'm a little confused because they opened the investigation because they said, we think there's fraud going on here, that these guys are getting donations, saying that they're using sophisticated intelligence to conduct these raids. And in fact, they're using a psychic medium. And then when they research it, they end up with 10,000 pages of psychic readings, which I can imagine at $1,500 per reading that you'd want to do a lot of readings, that they come up with 10,000 documents showing that that's exactly what they're doing. And then they don't press any charges. Why did you do an investigation that validated what you found and then not press any charges? But Sean Reyes is the Attorney General, and that's who they gave these to. And he's a strong supporter of O.U.R and a personal friend of Tim Ballard. So it's got to raise some flags there. Was this investigation squashed by the AG to protect Tim Ballard and O.U.R? Because it sure sounds like they found exactly what they were looking for. So I don't understand why they had an investigation to find out exactly what they found, and then they didn't press any charges.
Exactly. And that isn't really covered by Vice. They just simply say the investigation is closed, and their articles are based on copious amounts of information that came to light during the investigation. So we don't know. And I wonder, there may be some questions. Maybe it will be reopened. We have no idea. Let's go to our next slide. This is another pivotal statement I found in this article. The centrality of Russon to O.U.R mission is clearly illustrated in these files. One is an investigator's description of a video apparently taken to go by the date of the file ahead of the disastrous mission to find Gardy. So they actually have this on video. Not only do they have witnesses, who are part of these seances, they have video. Ballard is speaking to, and this is Tim Ballard, is speaking to a group of men. He assures them that he speaks regularly with M. Russell Ballard. Now, this is another component that hopefully, if you've been following the story, that you're aware. that M. Russell Ballard is also a key player in Operation Underground Railroad as far as support, recruiting donors, this kind of thing. Speaking regularly with M. Russell Ballard, a powerful and revered figure in the LDS Church, to whom he is not related, about the whole process and all these miracles, and then he has been given a blessing by an apostle. So the keynote here, speaking regularly with M. Russell Ballard, a powerful and revered figure in the LDS Church, the whole process and all these miracles, which I can only assume means the miracles of having Nephi direct the operation, and also that he's been giving a blessing by the apostle. So I think that's what everybody's trying to find out. Was Elder Ballard aware that the operation was being led by mystical means, that Nephi was talking to the group, and was Elder Ballard okay with that? He's giving a blessing to Tim Ballard after Tim Ballard says, I told him all about it. So how do you take that? I think that's a question. Is an apostle of the LDS Church aware of seances, aware of Nephi, the ghost of Nephi, the spirit of Nephi speaking, and yet still saying, sounds good to me, let's get this done? I mean, that I think is one of the big questions.
Whenever you use the term miracles, boy, that sure seems to be used very loosely. I'm trying to figure out what was a miracle. Evidently there were plenty of miracles, and I don't know what these miracles are. In fact, in the article here in Haiti, they found nobody. Is that a miracle? Finding anybody? To me, it would be a miracle if she actually got to where this child was using nothing but psychic abilities. So I'm not sure what the miracles are that they're talking about. They sure use that in a loose term. But this has been reported several times that Elder Ballard would give them blessings before they would go on these missions. So Elder Ballard is giving a apostolic blessing to go and do this work based on psychic information provided by Nephi. Now, whether Elder Ballard knew that or not, I don't know. But as a prophet and oracle himself, you would think that he might be able to make that determination or know that something didn't seem quite right while he's giving a priesthood blessing, if he's in fact getting information from on high. So it seems almost like there's two people getting information from on high, and neither one of them is really getting any information. It seems.
Oh dear, you had to go there and make that comparison. So yeah, and we did put out an episode on Monday with more of these details about the relationship between, alleged relationship between M. Russell Ballard and Tim Ballard, and that's very convoluted, and everyone is trying to sort that out. And there will be more articles, of course, coming out about that, and that is sort of the crux of why there was a statement put out in one of the original Vice article where a church spokesman says, nope, no relation. They've distanced themselves, very little to do with each other. So like I said, there's so many twists and turns here. We need a psychic to figure it out, right? Maybe I should get my crystal ball. It's right over here on my desk. It's really heavy. Otherwise, maybe I will pick it up later and look into it. So, all right, let's continue on. But it seems like here, Ballard is giving his blessing for the mission, and may or may not be aware of who really is directing the mission, and that would be Nephi. All right, you want to pick it up? I think it says in response is our next paragraph here.
In response, one of O.U.R's operators, whom Vice News is not naming because he could not be reached for comment, says, "This is the time that we're supposed to be here, specifically this week. And the Lord doesn't just give one person that answer. It's usually through a few people. And the Lord told me to call Janet as soon as I got out of the temple."
Go to our next slide. That's probably my favorite line from the whole article. Yeah, and I put into AI, what would it look like, a psychic in a temple? And I think it's kind of cut off there, but it actually did come up with a temple and a very psychic-looking psychic sitting right next to the temple. So the phrase there is, the Lord told me to call Janet as soon as I got out of the temple. So apparently the revelation that you get in the temple, at least for this person, where you are supposed to receive inspiration, perhaps otherworldly inspiration. Once you receive this inspiration in the temple, the inspiration tells you, you need to go call a psychic. That's what you need to do. So.
Well, it sounds like he's already talking to a psychic and getting this information. Then he goes to the temple and gets the information. Elder Ballard is getting, blessings from on high. Everybody here seems to be getting information, and here's Janet getting paid $5,000 plus $1,500 a reading. And then you got to go verify it in the temple, evidently.
I guess so.
Why pay if you can just go to the temple and get it for free? I'm not sure why.
Well, it never hurts to have too many otherworldly sources confirming what you need to know, especially when this is really important. And I know we fall into this trap here where we're sort of being incredulous or making light of this, but again, the underlying principle is, of course, these exploited children, and we definitely want any organization that's out there that's trying to do this work to be able to do it. In this case, of course, we're questioning the methodology. We're questioning that they can even effectively do anything for the purpose that is stated, and especially the fact that their donors and supporters probably have no idea that this is actually how the organization is run. So.
Well, and I see this when you're taking this information and you're calling the boy's parents and telling him that,
I know.
Now, not only are children being exploited, but the parents are being exploited as well. You're exploiting everybody at this point.
I know. It almost just seems like, to me, I think I used the word before, cosplay. Like when you hear about these missions and you hear about some of the failed missions where, it was, I mean, millions of dollars, high net worth donors pumping money into this. And then it almost just seems in a way that it's cosplay. They just run out there irresponsibly from some of the things we've heard, trying to do this. And in lots of situations, maybe even making it worse for some of the people. There was another article saying that their tactics could possibly actually be making it worse in this area. So, all right, let's go on to the next paragraph.
Okay. Let's see. I've got to find out where I'm at.
Two former O.U.R. insiders. I know.
Yeah, two former O.U.R. insiders told investigators that Russon and her psychic visions were a key part of O.U.R. They were Lopez, a former Navy SEAL who worked with the group on overseas missions and oversaw O.U.R. operations in Haiti, and a former director of development whose name Vice News is withholding at her request. So two different people said, yeah, these were the operational developments that we used. Lopez told investigators that Russon identified specific locations in Haiti where the missing boy was said to be. The former development director added that Russon was solely vouched for by Ballard, who in her telling intimated that M. Russell Ballard was aware that her visions guided O.U.R.'s work. So they're making the actual claim that he knew about that.
And her telling intimated, okay. So she, and there are just too many Ballards. Couldn't one of them have had a different name? It's just because now I'm rereading that statement. So she's saying that Tim Ballard completely vouched for her, solely vouched for her, and also,
he says he intimated that M. Russell Ballard was aware.
That's what I'm saying. So he intimated.
He led her to believe that he knew about it. Now, whether that was true or not, we don't know. But that's what.
Again, that's right. So he's telling all of his close circle at the top. M. Russell Ballard knows what's happening. He knows about Janet and her visions. He knows Nephi is directing this, and he is completely on board. Yeah. Well, and I can see how that would affect people, especially since a lot of his high-level people are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they're going to trust what a prophet says and what a prophet wants you to do, as has come out in other articles. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let's see. I'll pick it up here. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints issued a statement to Vice News last week. This is that statement we're referring to, strongly rebuking Tim Ballard for using Elder Ballard's name, saying that Tim Ballard has betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable. We're still trying to find out exactly what that refers to. There are all kinds of allegations of, grooming and inappropriate activities with some of the women that went along on these missions. The church did not specify what morally unacceptable behavior it was referring to. And again, that speaks to what I mentioned at the beginning. This is why Tim is putting out statements and videos and saying, oh, tell us what you mean. The silence is not going to do it. I did nothing. I'm still a member in good standing. I stand by what I did. I didn't do anything. And because we're not hearing more on the other side, everyone is very confused, especially his followers, very confused. And from what I'm reading, they're really starting to just say, okay, Tim, we believe you, because the church has not come out and said anything otherwise. So we believe you.
Yeah, is morally unacceptable the fact that he used Elder Ballard's name without his permission? Is that morally unacceptable? Or are they saying that it's morally unacceptable to believe in visions of people who are pretending that they receive visions? If that's the case,
no, that they would never say that. That opens up a whole other Pandora's box there.
That opens a whole box. Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this after the article. We're going to give you all some context because, again, having a prophet come and talk to you, having revelation, that is something that you might hear from the pulpit any Sunday. And then, of course, the very darker side, which I don't think has escaped any of us, we have Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell. They were also channeling former Book of Mormon prophets. They were saying they were reincarnated versions of former Book of Mormon prophets. So, where does that dark turn happen? Where is it acceptable to hear in testimony meeting, I had a revelation, I feel this way, or hear it in general conference? And then where does it go off the rails when you hear it from somebody else and it's being used for other purposes? I guess maybe that's when personal revelation comes in. You're going to have to decide what works for you. But again, it's all very convoluted, I think, which is why it's so interesting to talk about, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yep. And if listening to people who commune with God or claim to commune with God is morally unacceptable, then the entire church would be held at as morally unacceptable. So certainly that can't be what he's talking about.
No, that can't be the case. That means you shouldn't even turn into conference in a couple of weeks.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's why maybe the church is being a little silent. They're probably trying to craft this statement. What can they say next? There's a lot of gray areas here where they can almost be pointing a finger at Tim, but the finger points right back at them, and we're gonna go into some of that a little bit later here. So let's get through the article. The next part is where they're going to actually talk about this mission directed by a psychic. Landon, why don't you read that? Because it was in all articles described as a failed mission, a very frightening mission, a botched mission.
Yeah, in February 2016, a car carrying Russon, Ballard, and Guzno Marty circulated through the village as O.U.R. continued its quest for Gardy. As they drove, Russon began to cry, according to a summary of the audio written by an investigator. "Your mom is loud, your mom is clear," Russon told Guzno Marty, implying that the woman's departed spirit was guiding her. Russon subsequently claimed that she was hearing a reading from Guzno Marty's mother and sister, both of whom are apparently deceased. A person close to Marty family told Vice News that Guzno does not wish to speak to the press at this time. So she's literally there saying that she's seen Guzno's dead wife and daughter. And
I think it's his mother. It's his mother and sister. Yeah, so it'd be Gardy Marty's grandma. But she's definitely calling on family members. The attachment there, this father of a kidnapped child is sitting in the car. I mean, it must have been just a supercharged experience. But again, to me, that's exploiting someone and their emotions and their desperation. And yeah.
And it should be noted that this was all being filmed by a film crew who is part of this organization that Tim has set up for profit. So he's done it for profit in order to be able to put this out on and sell it. And so here is a lot of drama and a lot of things happening that would make you think, that he shouldn't be out there.
No, that's exactly right. And I know that, they were being followed around by a documentary crew. They put together a documentary. I think they were trying to sell it to Netflix, or I can't remember exactly the details, but they definitely had this idea that this would make a good documentary. And this would. I mean, this is a very dramatic scene But then you have to think about the human element. You have to think about this father absolutely tortured that his son has been kidnapped for years now, years. And someone is manipulating him and telling him, your mother is talking. Your mother knows where your son is. I mean, it's extraordinarily irresponsible. And I feel it's extremely cruel. And again, it says that the father does not want to speak to the press at this time. So if these details, if he's aware of these details now that have all been coming out, how devastating, like you said, that hope given, manipulated, and then ripped from you. So that's just a really unfortunate.
And it should be noted, these aren't just claims. This is on the video. They have the actual video of this interaction. So.
Yep, that's right. All right, next paragraph. So yeah, we can just picture how this is all going down, driving around, channeling spirits, the father desperate. Yeah, it's actually kind of a horrific scene.
When the FBI and Davis County investigators began their criminal investigation into O.U.R, which was ultimately closed with no charges filed, Russon's role in the organization was one of the many issues they looked into. At one point, Davis County, Utah attorney Troy Rawlings emailed other agencies participating in the investigation to say that, as he understood it, investigators had collected 10,000 pages of Russon's so-called readings. They indicated in more detail who exactly Russon was reaching out to in the great beyond, a deceased Mormon prophet. Janet Russon talks to dead Mormon leaders, Rawlings wrote, particularly a Mormon prophet from 600 BC named Nephi, to get intel on where to find Gardy Marty in particular, but also with respect to a slew of other things. Donors, Rawlings added, are not made aware that Nephi, via Miss Russon, is the key piece of O.U.R operational intelligence.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's our next slide right there. That's another key statement, again, that we can't make enough. Donors are not made aware that Nephi himself is the key piece of O.U.R operational intelligence. And
the scary part of that is, if they were made aware of it, they'd probably make bigger donations.
No, I was just going to say that, actually. Yes, and I think a certain kind of person would. I do think that. Oh, look, the sun's coming up on you, Landon, right there. Not much you can do about that, huh? That's right. There you go. Oh, that's funny. I like that, though. Kind of had a shining glow. I felt like maybe almost a psychic kind of a scenario was starting to happen. Maybe you were going to make some pronouncements. So yeah, and again, it's not clear to me, is it to you, if this was why they were being investigated or just one of the reasons, this kind of fraud at the top, that donors are not aware where this, information is coming from. But I guess they can't speak to whether or not they would make a bigger donation, they would cut their donations altogether. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the tithing thing, right? If Mormons are aware that there's already this massive Ensign Peak fund, would they continue paying tithing? I don't know. You can't really speak to what they would do. What do you think?
Yeah, and again, this just raises more questions than it answers. They started the investigation. He says what the reason for the investigation was, that donors weren't being made aware of this, and then they found all the documents and the video showing that they had in fact done exactly that.
Right.
And then there's no charges pressed, and we learn in this very story that AG Sean Reyes went on some of these missions, and that's got to be a pretty embarrassing situation for him to be in. I don't know. I would think an AG would need to recuse himself in an investigation of an organization with which he participated in. This is the part of the story I don't understand yet. Maybe there's more coming out, but it certainly seems like there should be an investigation into this investigation.
An investigation into the investigation. Yeah, because we kind of brought that up. Of course, this chain of events all started. Mitt Romney said, I'm not running for the Senate seat. Everyone thought Sean Reyes would run. He said, I'm not running, but I want to support, Tim Ballard. And then we all started thinking, yeah, but if you know this information, you know that Tim Ballard is operating under the direction of Nephi, you're okay with him running these operations that you've gone on with him, and you're okay with him, representing Utah as a senator with this background that you are being, you're channeling Nephi and making a lot of decisions based on this. So yeah, that raises some questions too. And again, we're just speculating. We don't know exactly, but that's kind of how it appears. Okay, there's one last short paragraph. I'll read that. It's unclear what became of Children Need Families, and that was the organization that Janet was then heading within the other organization. Tim Ballard left O.U.R. following an internal investigation. At present, blog posts discussing it are still on the organization's website, but a separate website which listed Russon as its executive director appears to have been taken down. So it looks like everybody's kind of disbanding. Tim is gone, Janet is gone, and as they said, Tim was Janet's sole, kind of supporter. Like he absolutely had her back and told everybody, this is how we're going to run everything. Janet is credible. Janet is legit. So that's the end of the article.
Yeah, there sure seems to be a lot of web pages being taken down over the last couple of days.
Very quickly. Yes. If I could tell everybody, screenshots, take them. If you're browsing through something and you're like, this is interesting, take the screenshot, because as I found, you can go back even a couple hours later and it's gone. So I've saved several people's bacon in the post-Mormon podcasting world by taking some screenshots and sharing them. So I wanted to look a little bit more, just very briefly, into the context of this, because, of course, the LDS Church is all over this. Most of the high-level donors are LDS. Tim himself on his video just last night said, I am active LDS. The church has come out, they condemning statements. So this is all very much wrapped up into the church. And what does the LDS Church think about a medium? Seances, talking to a dead prophet. And I thought there would be way more information on it. I think a lot of it is sort of anecdotal. For example, my husband and I were DJing a stake dance, several years ago here in Utah. And we played a very popular song that's been popular for decades, Thriller, right? Michael Jackson, right? Very quickly after we started the song, the kids were dancing like crazy. It's a song that was played all the time. Somebody from the stake Young Men, Young Women practically jumped over the DJ table and said, turn that off. That is the occult. That is magic. Turn it off, and made us shut the song down. So there's an individual that thinks that the church's point of view is not having any of this, right? So I went to the handbook, the church handbook, and actually, the church handbook has very little to say on the matter, which I was surprised. In fact, all that comes close is the following definition and the warning. Do you want to read that, Landon? This is from the church handbook.
Yeah, the occult focuses on darkness and leads to deception. It destroys faith in Christ. The occult includes Satan worship. It also includes mystical activities that are not in harmony with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Such activities include, but are not limited to, fortune telling, curses, and healing, practices that are limitations of the priesthood power of God. Church members should not engage in any form of Satan worship or participate in any way with the occult. They should not focus on such darkness in conversations or in church meetings.
And so there I have a picture. I asked AI to create a picture of some wizards in a circle, right? Giving a blessing. And then I found another picture, very similar right there, of a baby blessing. So you draw your own conclusions. But it definitely listed fortune telling as something that they considered an occult activity. Of course, then they talk about the darker sides of it. I'm not sure if fortune telling would be considered as dark as they're saying. But, and this has come up recently as more and more, especially LDS women, get involved in essential oils, energy healing, blessings, things like that. There have been questions about that. And there have been statements that come out that kind of allude to we should not be involved in that. But I think there's a lot of pushback. And that's not the same as channeling a dead prophet, but it's all a little bit in that realm. Don't you think that the church is sort of sliding, at least anecdotally, through the membership into that realm with healings and oils and blessings and things like that? Or have they always been in that realm and nobody's really made the connection? That's another question.
Well, I'm reading that last bolded part there where it says, and healing practices that are limitations of the priesthood power of God. So in other words, if someone comes and gives you a priesthood blessing, that's not an occult. That blessing is from God. But if you do anything, if you get a blessing from somebody else or some other way, now you're limiting the priesthood of God, and therefore that's an occult. So it's okay when we do it. It's not okay when anybody else does it. Both ways, I just don't see that. And the occult includes Satan worship. There's a lot of magical thinking out there that occurs without Satan being involved at all.
Exactly.
A lot of magic worldviews. And
I thought that was a little naive to say that it's always about Satan, because as we'll find out in our next couple slides, it's not. And think about patriarchal blessings. If that isn't somebody channeling something, some kind of power to give somebody a reading about your future,
it's exactly the same thing.
I was going to say it's exactly the same, only different, right? Different. That's what it is. Exactly the same, only different. So yeah, but one is very acceptable, and one, of course, is into the fringes. That's exactly right. So I think maybe that's why, Tim explaining this to his donors who were in the room when these readings were happening with Janet, maybe there's a familiarity. We've been in rooms where there are blessings. We've been to the temple where someone will say, I sense someone is here. I sense a relative who's passed on is here. We hear this a lot in the church. This is part of how we operate. We read stories from the past. This happened all the time. In my own family, they were heavily into genealogy, and my mom was very sensitive to things like this, or said that she was, and would often tell me, great-great-grandmother so-and-so appeared to me. She told me where I could find this genealogical information. I grew up with that. It was just absolutely normal. And it was not until I had my own children, kids of the 21st century, and I would take them to visit grandma, and she would start talking about her genealogy ghosts. And my kids would look at me kind of like, Mom, and then I kind of saw it through more secular eyes, and I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, this is scary to kids. And I would have to cut my mom off. Okay, Mom, that's enough. We're going to go watch Pokemon now. But yeah, I think we hear stories like this. And so it doesn't sound unfamiliar. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So, all right, let's go to our next slide, because this will talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so I found an Ensign article, Ensign. I'm going to say it all ways, because always in the comments, people correct me. I'm going to say Liahona. I'm going to be on board with that. It's much easier to pronounce. Anyway, this is called What the Scriptures Say About Astrology, Divination, Spirit Mediums, Magic, Wizardry, and Necromancy, because this is mentioned a lot in the Bible. Landon and I did an episode where we talked about D. Michael Quinn's Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview, where they go into the hand-in-glove relationship between magic and early Christianity. But in this article, it says, probably too small, even for you to read, Landon. I have it printed out here. So the scriptures show that the enchantments and spells of the wizard, the medium, and the necromancer are characteristic of false religions and superstitions of the world. And those that practice such are actually in competition with the true prophets and apostles. So here we see same practices, like you said, one good, one bad, competition. All who are acquainted with the spirit and faith of Jesus Christ will want nothing to do with any form of divination and spiritual wizardry. I'll tell that to Harry Potter fans. No, but that's actually a real thing. And I've said this before, growing up in Utah County with my kids, if I'd have a Harry Potter birthday because we loved it, some kids were not allowed to attend, which is so ironic, given the origins of the early church. Anyway, we'll get into that. Although we are not inundated with floods of individuals practicing or encouraging our practices of the occult arts, their practice does ebb and flow in popularity over time. It may seem silly or harmless to have a psychic or a tarot card reading, but it should be avoided. Joseph Smith warned, lying spirits are going forth in this earth. There will be great manifestations of spirits, both false and true. That is true. Sometimes Joseph Smith said he had a hard time telling whether it was God or the devil talking to him, right? Go find this buried treasure. I guess that was Satan. Didn't work out so well. And it did seem to ebb and flow depending on whether it worked out or not, which, that's a whole nother podcast.
It's interesting that they didn't quote Joseph Smith on any of his, statements in regard to treasure digging and the treasure spirits and the other things he was involved with.
Not going to go there. Not going to go there at all. He said there are lying spirits abroad and we've got to watch out. Okay. But how do we determine which is which? Okay. So here's the question. Which is which? Like we just said. So I guess we're going to get the article in the Ensign. Ensign Liahona. The Book of Mormon provides some encouragement that we can know the false from the true and the insights into how. For behold, my brethren, it is given unto you to judge, that ye may know good from evil. And the way to judge is as plain, that ye may know with a perfect knowledge as the daylight is from the dark of night. So it's up to you. You can make that determination on how you feel. But whatsoever thing persuadeth men to do evil, and believe not in Christ, and deny him, and serve not God, then ye shall know with a perfect knowledge that that is of the devil. But after this manner doth the devil work, for he persuadeth no man to do good, no, not when, neither do his angels, neither do they who subject themselves unto him. Moroni 7:15-17. Okay, so if however you're getting your spiritual information is telling you to do evil, then it's of the devil. But does that imply that if you're getting spiritual information through a source like a psychic or a medium that tells you to do good, which I can't imagine anything more good than trying to rescue an exploited and trafficked child, or give a family peace because you've been able to find and help that child, this seems to imply to me that then it is of God. So it's very difficult. Let me read the very
it's not
last.
making them not believe in Jesus either. These people fully believe in Jesus, and they're going to the temple to get confirmations of it. So clearly what they're doing is not in the occult, and this is perfectly normal behavior.
Yep. I am not seeing any conflict now that I've been reading this scripture.
This is priesthood power this woman's exercising, evidently, because it's not occult power. So
yeah, and that's why it's so convoluted. It is extraordinarily, it's a very, very fine line. So final paragraph, bottom line, says the article, seek truth and understanding from the Holy Ghost. Study the scriptures and the words of the prophets. Receive and study your patriarchal blessing. Now that's funny because we just made that comparison that literally is like going to a medium or a tarot card reader. But in this case, it's of God, so it's okay. In short, rely on the Lord, not claimed mystical gifts from others. So it's all about who claims to have what power and from where, and who you yourself attribute that authority to. Claimed mystical gifts from others. If it's something we need to know, the Lord will tell us if we seek him and strive to hear him. Well, I'm kind of more confused than ever by that article. To me, that raises more questions than answers and actually does open the door to the idea that if a mystical power tells you to do good, then maybe it's okay.
This by the definition in Moroni, this very definition, everything here that they were doing meets the requirements of being from God. So they left out one thing that they should have included as to whether you could tell whether it's from God or whether it's made up. And that is, if it's a woman that's telling you that, it's clearly not from God.
Okay. Thank you,
that's
Landon.
the difference, because she
Yeah.
could not have the priesthood. So when Elder Ballard makes these claims, it's okay because he's a man. But when she makes the claim, it's not okay because she's a woman.
Yeah, you're not far off on that. I'm not kidding. That may be part of it. A prejudice against any forward-seeing woman. That could be it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I know we need to wrap up here pretty quickly. We just wanted to mention, of course, that the origins of our church are rooted in mysticism and magic. And as I said, Landon and I, we did a big old presentation. We put it out, I think, 2 weeks ago on early Mormonism and the magic worldview, D. Michael Quinn. Please dive into that. That is a rabbit hole. But the burned over district, which you can see here in the New York area, those are all the counties. There's so many different religions that were spawned in that area at the same time. You've got Seventh-day Adventists, you've got Mormonism, of course. That's a nice picture of Joseph Smith right there. And you also have the spiritualist movement with the Fox sisters. Our slide says the Fox sisters, Margaretta, Kate, and Leah of Hydesville, New York, conducted the first table wrapping seances in the area around in 1848, leading to the American movement of spiritualism, centered in the retreat at Lily Dale and in the Plymouth Spiritualist Church in Rochester, New York, which taught communion with the dead. So this is nothing new. The origins of the church are completely in line with spiritualism and communicating with the dead. What do you think, Landon?
It seems like it's in line. It's what you use the term spiritualism, then it's a cult, then it's priesthood, and it seems to be one definition of all the same thing. So
of all the same thing. And again, we encourage everybody to look into the magical origins of the early church. You will have your mind blown. And like I said, we had our own episode on that, but there are many episodes. It's an absolutely fascinating rabbit hole. Let's go to our next slide. So that's the area.
Sorry.
Was it? Yeah. Okay. We're talking about the area and just an overwhelming spiritualistic view. And we also have those magical Smiths in the Smith family. The Smiths themselves practiced so many forms of magic, from seer stones to magic daggers to parchments and spells worn around their necks. And again, you can see this spiritualism and magic practiced by the Smiths morphing eventually into religious practices as just the general tone of the United States changed, right? Isn't that kind of how you look at it, Landon? I kind of see, so it's Moroni Day today, the happy Moroni Day, everybody, as we're talking. You know, the story we got growing up is that it was an angel that visited, it was the equinox, it was a treasure guardian, you know, but that story doesn't fly after a point. And I see the Smiths and Joseph sort of morphing what used to be acceptable magical practices. Hey, everybody, I was visited by a treasure guardian. And everyone goes, yay. Suddenly, mysticism, magic out of favor, religion in. Joseph says, oh, did I say treasure guardian? I meant angel. Yay. You know, so you just have to kind of morph it to fit the tone of the time. Any thoughts on that, Landon?
Yeah, just the magical worldview was very common in that time period. And it just shows that people generally are magical thinkers. Even today, with all the science, we still see people falling for this type of ruse and wanting that magical worldview. Everyone wants superpowers. Everyone wants something more than what is in reality. And I think that's just something we as humans desire. But that doesn't make it true or actual right because of it.
No, I think that's true. And you, Landon, are looking more and more magical as the sun comes up in your window. You're literally glowing.
It's a cloudy day and it keeps changing. I can't get the light there.
You look like Moroni right there. Literally, on Moroni Day, it looks like you're kind of appering in a manifestation here. All right, let's move to our next slide.
I'm in and out of the light, just like Tim Ballard.
All right, let's move through these. I think we're almost finished here. There was a mystical group that kind of started up once the saints all got to Utah, the Godbeites, and they were sort of a little faction. It's another thing to look into. They were not happy with the way commerce was going and the way it was being controlled by Brigham Young, but so they kind of broke off. But they definitely had mysticism, spiritualism, communicating with the dead. All the, you know, the saints were communicating with the dead. They were going to the temple to do, or the endowment house to do work for the dead. So it wasn't that far off to see that there would be a little splinter group, the Godbeites, that embraced spiritualism and mysticism a little bit more. Any thoughts on the Godbeites?
No, nothing to add on that.
But. Yeah, just look into it. We're just very briefly touching on all of this to let you know that there are magical, mystical origins, of course, to our very own church right here. So, and like I said, many wonderful podcasts on all these topics out there. So I wanted to find out very quickly as we're ending here, what are people thinking about this as these stories are coming out? What are they thinking about using a medium, using a psychic? Do Mormons do this? So I went on a whole bunch of faithful sites. I looked at a bunch of comments and they kind of ran the gamut. I found a lot of comments that said, yes, I have gone to a psychic before. I have asked about my family members that have passed on. And these are faithful Mormons that I'm getting this information from. And they find peace. So you can look your relatives up on Family Search. I have that on the slide. Or you can participate in a seance. There's a picture of a, old school, like I said, table wrapping seance there. So people definitely, although they have the church and they have the gospel, again, this is information from faithful sites, they still feel that they need a little more. And people are going to psychics. They're wanting answers. They're wanting communication.
Isn't it interesting to see that comparison? If you sit around and have a seance to talk to someone who's passed on to the other side and you feel to get a connection to them, that's evil and occultish. But if you go to the temple and do the work for someone and say, I felt their presence there, they were there with us, that's a wonderful magical experience.
Yeah.
But if you're at a seance and you feel their presence, it's occultish and wicked.
That's what I'm saying. It's very convoluted. And I have had family members that have attended temple sessions. As we all know my story, I didn't go very often because it was too PTSD for me. But they've been sessions where the officiator will stop during a sealing or something and say, have you had someone that recently passed on? I feel a presence here. It's a man, and they'll go, Grandpa. I mean, they do this. They encourage you to sense and feel the spirits of people that have passed on. Again, no difference, but very different. Exactly the same, only different. So I know that's why this opens up this whole topic for speculation and conversation, and it's really interesting. All right, I think we have one or two more slides very quickly. I also found some people online that knew Janet herself. One person said Janet is a very well-meaning person. Again, Janet is a psychic who was guiding the operations for Tim Ballard's organization. Janet is a very well-meaning person. She has been helping people communicate with their dead ancestors, one of her spiritual gifts. So here you see the two worlds coming together. She's an active LDS person. She's been told she has spiritual gifts. A lot of us are told that in our patriarchal blessings. You have spiritual gifts. One of her spiritual gifts in her mind is communication with dead spirits, dead prophets. So it's completely hand in hand. Sad to see her caught up in the O.U.R. stuff. She and her family were very nice, but definitely had some pretty out there beliefs. So that was one comment from somebody who actually knew Janet. But again, we're often blessed with spiritual gifts. This is hers. Is she wrong? Is there something wrong with this? I don't know. Somebody else said, I have a family member that does this. Originally, it was within the LDS framework, kind of like we talked about, but then they abandoned that. So it sounds like, LDS philosophy is kind of a gateway, and then you can take it farther to the extreme. Another person says, my aunt and cousin go to a psychic in Davis County. I really wonder if it's the same one that Tim uses. I would think they would pay for a good one. So this person knows that their family members regularly go and would be willing to pay quite a bit of money. Again, Landon, we may be in the wrong business. I'm not kidding. With you glowing like that, and me and my crystal, I'm going to pick up my crystal ball just so I can show everybody that I do actually have it. It's on a stand, but here it is. With you glowing and me and my crystal ball, I'm thinking maybe we can start a side business for Mormonish. I don't know. What do you think?
I think at $1,500 a reading, it pays more than a podcast.
Yeah. Let us know if you would like us to do a reading for you, please. So,
I've got to ask on this last one when they say, I think they would pay for a good one. What's the definition of a good psychic? Somebody
that tells you what you want to hear,
what you want to hear, or something that comes true. Yeah. And is Russell M. Russell Ballard a good one, a good psychic? Is he making correct predictions or?
Well, and that's true. No, that's a good point. People do go to their leaders. They go to their bishop. What do you think I should do? And they're assuming that their bishop is not acting just as a man. Their bishop is acting with a mantle, with some kind of special discernment,
Yep.
And for example, a missionary, his mission president has, I've been told this by my children that have served mission, has special discernment for you, the missionary. You can trust what they say. You can listen to them. They can talk to you about your future and what they feel God wants you to do. So you're absolutely right. It's the very same. All right, let's go to our next one. Okay, here's somebody that says, story time. I grew up in the same ward as Janet Russon in Provo at the edge of BYU. She gave me some slightly witchy vibes, like many of the women in the ward. Now that's interesting. It means maybe they were into a lot of the essential oils, crystals, that kind of stuff. She was very into gardening, kind of withdrawn, and seemed to control her husband, like many within the ward. Okay, so that sounds like a coven. I don't know. But anyway, so this person knew, that she has always had this more otherworldly pursuits that she was interested in. Here's somebody that says, my aunt is a Mormon psychic. She claims to be able to allow people to communicate with their ancestors and operates a side business hawking her self-help program. I'm sure there are hundreds of similar programs in the Mormon community. And I'm sure that's true too. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg in this. I think this is a subculture in Mormonism that you and I perhaps are not really aware of, and a lot of people aren't, and may come out a little more because of all this information. I think we're on to our very last second. Okay, this is funny. This is actually from our friend Gene Judson. Everybody knows him. and I thought this too, and this is kind of a funny note. Why would a psychic channel Nephi instead of Moroni to assist in a paramilitary operation? And that's maybe it's because of the way it went for Moroni. Maybe, not so great. Maybe that's why he thought Nephi might have better.
Well, he kind of has established himself more as a treasure angel at this point than an actual paramilitary angel. So
dial it back. That's right. All right. I think that brings us to the very end. Do you feel that we've covered it, Landon?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so too. It's a very interesting topic. And again, I will predict, wait, hold on. This is really heavy. Seriously, you do not know. This is like a real crystal ball and it's on a stand. I will predict, looking in here, that we have not seen the end of this and that more and more people will be digging into and trying to find out more about this sort of psychic undercurrent that exists in the Mormon church, and also dig more into how does it relate to Mormonism and the psychic outer current that is there, right? It's one and the same. It really is. So please comment. Let us know your experiences with mediums or psychics, or what you think the comparison is between your patriarchal blessing and going to have, your palms read. I think there's a lot there, and I think we're going to see a lot more coming out about it. And these are good questions. It kind of helps you understand what you believe and what you think and what you used to believe and where it all fits. So anyway, thank you, Landon. And thank you to any spirits that joined us today on the podcast. There might have been some. Landon was glowing. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish. And if you'd like to be made aware of new episodes coming out, you can hit that donation button, the bell, and you'll be made aware. Also, if you'd like to financially support the infrastructure of Mormonish Podcast, there are links in the show notes on how to donate through Venmo and also through PayPal. We just absolutely love our viewers and our listeners and the support that they all give us. And I'm sure that you'll see us again, because I guarantee as soon as we put this podcast out, within half an hour, there's going to be something new, and this podcast will be obsolete. That's how it's happening in this real-time situation with Tim Ballard and M. Russell Ballard. So thanks again, everybody from Mormonish.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.